Now, my focus is going to be on branding and marketing and how we connect with customers using different values. But I hope you get something out of this from a personal level, understanding how you can build stronger relationships with your children, your parents, colleagues. But rather than trying to impress you with my knowledge of the different generations using stats and graphs and bar charts, I'm going to call on the services of LEG to demonstrate to you a generations gap in action. Now, for those of you who need to see a bar graph to believe what I'm going to be telling you, you're going to be sorely disappointed because there are no bar graphs in my presentation. So I'm using LEG, and I know, LEG is better known today as Bruno or Borat, but we want to keep the content family friendly. He's interviewing Sir Rhodes Boyson, and they're talking about caning. Now, when I went to school, I went to an all-boys school, and caning typically involved me being naughty, being sent to the headmaster's office, being made to bend over a chair, and getting a few smacks on the backside. It was pretty painful, to be honest, and for correctional purposes only, I was told. I don't think my headmaster enjoyed what he was doing. You never know. But anyway, today you can't cane children. It's illegal. That doesn't stop them going out and getting caned. It just typically means using a little bit of illegal substances. So let's have a look at two people from two very different generations having a conversation.
Listen here, I've got none other than my main man, Sir Rhodes Boyson, in the house, because we is talking about the education thing. Let's talk about the discipline. Do you think, Sir Rhodes, there is enough discipline in school?
I think there's slightly less than there should be.
Do you believe kids should be caned?
I do. I have
You
caned
do?
them. I do.
Wicked, man.
I am.
You believe kids should be caned even in school?
Even in school.
Do you not think, Sir Rhodes, if you get caned in school, you can't concentrate as well? Because a lot of people out there say that if you're getting caned.
Well, I was caned in a time when I've concentrated all my life.
You were caned. Respect, man.
From that, it's the...
Respect.
From there, yeah, so I mean, it was it. I mean, it shouldn't be done evil and it shouldn't be done badly. But
you've got to have good stuff.
You have to have rules in life.
You have to have good cane.
You have to have a good cane.
It's very funny when you see it up there. But that kind of generational disconnect, it's not that funny if that kind of generational disconnect is happening between your brand and your customers. Now, it was probably my mother-in-law who first brought my attention to this generational divide. We were sitting at a table having a discussion. It was more of an argument, and she stopped and gave me one of those mother-in-law stares. You know the one I'm talking about? Sends shivers down your spine. And anyway, she stopped and she said these words to me. Dean, why can't everyone just be normal? Like me. Now, it was those last two words that really threw me, because whilst my mother-in-law is a wonderful woman, she's certifiably not normal. But it got me thinking, because here we were having this argument coming from our own worldview of what we thought was right, wrong, good, bad, weird, and normal. Now, psychologists and sociologists and people who study people call this our value system, this worldview, our value system. And your value system is largely in place by the age of 12. And that's pretty scary for parents with young children, because it means that you've got about 10 to 12 years to shape and influence their values. Their teens are going to be about challenging that value system, and parents with teenagers know that that sends you around the bend. But then by the time we're about 20, our value system is largely entrenched, and we carry our value system with us throughout the rest of our lives. And it's almost as a guiding light, a beacon of how we move through our life stages. Now, as marketers, we are used to using a number of variety of ways of slicing and dicing customers and understanding, getting greater insight into them. From a generational point of view, we're particularly interested in three of these: the age of a person, the era in which they were born, and their values. Now, the generational theory comes from two Harvard and Yale trained professors, William Strauss and Neil Howe. And back in the 1990s, they were doing a fascinating piece of research. They were political economists, and what they were trying to understand is how different events throughout society and history, how it shaped and formed the leaders of their times. And they mapped out world history all the way back to the War of the Roses, 500 years. And what they identified is that society seems to move through the cycle of being overly optimistic about things and then overly pessimistic, and this is society's mood changes. They then identified that there have been 6 key events in the past 500 years which have radically reshaped society and changed the course of history. And that society pre and post these events, the values had changed, the institutions had changed. And then they identified that these events happen, on average, every 80 to 90 years, to the point where they almost become predictable, like clockwork. They dug a little bit deeper and they identified within the 80-year cycle, there's a second cycle that exists, which is easily explained, if you think about it, as the different seasons. You start with the winter season. This is a time of a crisis when society is confronted with a big problem and world leaders have to come together to find a solution. You then move into a springtime. It's a sense of rebuilding. We're rebuilding society. There's a great sense of optimism and a sense that we can achieve anything. Society then moves into the summertime. This is a time when societies begin to question, are we on the right track? Are we heading in the right direction? There are a few things that seem to be wrong. And then lastly, you have the autumn period, and this is when society is going, well, we're starting to understand the problems. You know, we have things like global warming and terrorism and pandemics, but they're so big, there's so many, we don't know what to do about them. So rather than deal with them head on, we put our heads in the sand and we become very inward-looking. Society becomes very inward-looking and focuses on protecting things closest to it, sort of its families, its communities, its countries. And partly because we put our head in the sand, problems bubble to the surface and erupt and overflow and the cycle starts again. Well, that's the theory in a nutshell. So in order to understand other people, you almost need to understand yourself first. You need to understand what events were happening during the season that you were born into and how those events shaped and formed your own value system. So let's test out the theory, and I want you to come with me on a journey. We're going to go back and look over the past 80 years and have a look at how the different seasons have developed and the generations that they have created. So the last winter season was back in the 1930s and the 40s. And can you think of any 2 events that would have happened back then that would have shaped and formed any young kid growing up during the 30s and the 40s? Any 2 events? Any quick guesses? No? Great Depression, yeah, World War II. 2 small events, no matter where you were in the world, those events would have shaped and formed you. The generation born during this time have been called the silent generation. Not because they have nothing to say, but because kids that were born during this period were expected to be seen and not heard. Now, I have 3, don't know about you, but I have 3 children in our household, and we are not getting this right. We can't keep our children quiet around the dinner table. But then children of today are a bit different, aren't they? But you don't need a degree in history to know how important these events were, the Great Depression and World War II, how important they were in shaping and forming the people from this generation. Because you give anyone from the silent generation half a chance, they will tell you. And it normally goes something like this. And I think the first 10 seconds are the same in any language. When I was young, we never had, and whatever it was that you were talking about, they had it worse. They used to have to get up before the sun and walk 5 miles to get to school. Now, I'm not sure who was doing time planning during the Great Depression. They clearly had issues because they put everything 5 miles apart from everything else. And have you ever noticed how it was always uphill going there and uphill coming back? You know, in driving rain, hail, sleet and snow, barefoot, carrying your brother on your back. These were tough times. And I think you can probably imagine where I'm going with this.